as a wild child, if I didn't have that discipline early on, those opportunities I had with all that idle time and idle hands would have gotten me to make decisions without thinking about the consequence. I had consequence embedded in me early on since birth. The craving of discipline, having structure, appreciating the rule of law. Before I knew the rule of law, it was the rule of rule. These are the rules in the house. That morphed into the appreciation of the rule of law.
Well, welcome everybody back to the Audacious Faith Podcast. We're back here in El Monte, and we're excited today. Got a really special guest, someone that's just meeting for the first time, but we saw him on social media doing a lot of great things. He has a podcast himself. He's also a professor at Cal Baptist University, and jiu-jitsu. He does that. He teaches that. He participates in that, and he is a lieutenant with the El Monte Police Department, and that is Lieutenant Aram Choe. So thank you so much for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm looking forward to having everybody kind of get to know you a little bit better. Maybe let's start off. You can give a little bit of background of yourself. And that very important question, of course, is how did faith become a part of your life?
Yeah, well, I'll start with that. Okay. I grew up in a Korean Presbyterian church my entire life, so as early as I could walk. I've been involved in church, but it didn't really become a personal decision for me until I moved out of the house at age 18, and I attended a non-denominational English-speaking church. Yeah. And becoming an adult and having some things happen in my life around that time that was really impactful, really gave me a desire to come closer to God, whereas I thought it was more of an expectation by my family. It was never a personal decision. Yeah. But we'll get more into that later. I'm sure you'll have opportunities for me to talk about that. Sure. But yeah, I've been involved at the church my entire life, and certain crossroads in my life felt just right, that God was there with me. And almost every decision I made, even as a young adult, was guided by Christ at the helm. I'm married. I've got 4 kids. My wife and I will be celebrating our 21st anniversary this October. Nice. Okay. And my oldest will be 19 in a couple of weeks, and my youngest is 12. And I delivered her in the front seat of our Expedition. Oh, wow. You delivered yourself? Yeah. Oh. We lived in Eastvale at the time and had to drive 25 miles to Pomona Valley Hospital. Oh, yeah. We made it about 23 before she said we needed to pull over. And we pulled over to the first well-lit parking lot we can find, which is a McDonald's. And it had a sign that said open 24 hours. I'm like, perfect. They're going to have at least some towels. And I have limited emergency training due to my job as a police officer. And we pull up and the door's closed. So on the way there, I called 911. I probably passed by 3 or 4 officers going a million miles an hour. Sure. By the time I walked around back to the front seat, my wife was lifting herself up off the seat, says, "You need to deliver this baby." Oh, wow. And So I'm curious, as you're mentioning that, you said you got 23 out of the 25 miles. Are you're obviously trying to not deliver this child? Yeah, yourself. No, I wanted her to be delivered in a hospital where there was medical professionals. Yeah. And I was thinking of everything from my wife's health and safety to the baby's health and safety to the material inside the vehicle. I just was ill-equipped, I thought. We hear it a lot as believers. Give it in God's hands. You know, and you got to give it to God. And those moments of crisis, sometimes we don't think about that. And that was, one of the great arsenals I have in my testimony to tell people, even in the worst, most dire situations you can think of, He'll give you what you need. He'll equip you with what you need to make that happen. And what I left out was my daughter's umbilical cord was wrapped around her neck. Oh, wow. When she was born. So it wasn't just routine either. No, but luckily we had some training, and I knew, they're like a wet noodle, the umbilical cords. You just roll it across the face. And then the paramedics got there, and we ended up getting transported to the hospital with the umbilical cord still attached, and they did the cut at the doctor, and the rest is history. So looking back at that now, I mean, well, first of all, my first curious question was, who was more panicked, you or your wife? I think we were both silently, equally panicked, but been doing, at that time, it was 2012, so I'd been a cop for almost 13 years at that point, and I've seen a lot at that point. So I think my police officer mode just kind of kicked in, where I knew I kind of had to be a calm panic. And my wife, that was our fourth child, so I think she was a pro at that point. She knew what to expect, and basically needed someone to play catch. She did most of the work. I just played catch.
So she kind of knew already. Now, looking back at that too, here's my question. I mean, obviously, if you were to arrange it that way, you wouldn't have. But now, it's kind of not only a cool story, but experience. Is it kind of neat to know that you got to do that?
Yeah. One of the coolest things we had to do was, because it wasn't a birth in the hospital, we had to go to the county recorder's office to testify that we gave birth to our daughter in a vehicle.
Oh, yeah.
And I got to sign the birth certificate as the physician delivering.
Wow.
The other cool thing that's on that birth certificate, it says location of delivery, car.
And that's it. That's as specific as it gets.
Yeah.
Well, not everybody can say that. That's for sure.
No, yeah. She was born at McDonald. Oh, and one of my friends was a local reporter named Christine Devine, and she saw when we made the announcement on Facebook. I think I made an entry on Facebook saying, "What a night!" And my wife had the presence of mind to snag a photo right after the delivery, and I put the baby on her chest, and she just snagged a selfie with the baby, and posted that. And Christina sent a reporter to the hospital. So she has a nice souvenir from a Fox 11 news broadcast of my daughter's birth.
That is very cool. And this is what I'm thinking. So when your daughter gets asked at points in life, tell us something that nobody would guess about you. Yeah. She can say, I was delivered by my dad in a car.
Yeah. That's
who's going to guess that one?
Yeah,
right?
That's a very unique story.
Yeah. Now, you do a lot then. We mentioned it in your introduction. That's a handful. That's a scheduling, almost sounds like a scheduling nightmare. You also mentioned how faith has played a role in pretty much the majority of the decisions in your life. So these things that you do, have they all been filtered through, hey, does this advance the kingdom of God or does it not? I mean, is that something that you're constantly thinking?
Yeah, I think when we're used as tools for God, everything we do as Christians is God filtered, right?
Yeah.
We can't always see what the outcome is when things are falling into that funnel.
Right.
But what comes out at the end, you have to understand was touched by God. It was God filtered.
Yeah.
And that's everything. Even our encounters with Satan, when temptation comes to us, that's all part of the plan. We don't know when these things happen until we revisit later on. And I've got a great story about that later. But yeah, almost every decision I make is very consciously, is this going to, number one, God's at the center of our family, and paramount in every decision I make, is this going to glorify God? Is this going to reflect well on my family? And is this going to reflect well as me as a professional? And, the scheduling on social media, I put a lot out there. I'm I think that's why I got a lot of traction on social media. There was a lot of cops on social media before I got on, but they were doing, the stuff you see on TikTok, the dances, comedy. And I did dabble in that, but I know where my lane is. I'm not a comedian. But when social media first came out, experts told us to stay off social media. If you're a police officer, stay off social media. It's not for you. It's going to open up a lot of liability. But I think I had a good history of making solid decisions, and I believe that if my decisions come from a place where it's not illegal, unethical, or immoral, I'm going to be fine. And so I did, and I put my family out there. I think that was the unique thing. I did as a cop on social media. Was I wasn't afraid to put my family out there.
Right.
And so I did, and I think a lot of people gravitated towards that. My initial audience were cop families, and they wanted to see how we navigated things. Just like you observed, we appeared to be very busy, 4 kids. My wife stays at home. She homeschools them all. And here I am, a career-minded individual. I was never comfortable just staying in one position. I've always wanted to not be at the pinnacle, but at least get close to the pinnacle by the end of my career.
Sure.
And my wife supported that. She knew that this job was important. I was a cop before she married me. And I think one of the things that attracted her to me, or me to her, was the fact that I was very goal-oriented. And we complement each other very well in the sense that I could chase so many rainbows, but if it wasn't for her kind of reeling me back in, who knows where we would be right now. So she's my voice of reason when I have these outlandish ideas. But for some reason, God's blessed me with opportunity. You mentioned earlier in the intro, I'm a professor. If you knew me in high school, you would have never associated me with any kind of higher learning at all. I barely graduated high school.
Yeah.
Academic. When I was done with high school, I said, "That's it. I'm never going back to school." And the doors and opportunities kept coming for me to be more involved. And my life's been a blessing. I can easily say, I don't drive an exotic car, but my car is better than a lot of people. I don't live in a mansion, but my home is better than what a lot of people have.
Yeah.
And I do feel blessed to have, a lot of people don't recognize that these days. They always want more, and we're very content.
I think contentment is important. You're bringing that up, and for some, it seems that no matter what, it's always looking to the next thing, not taking in. Do you, since you mentioned that, do you make a point of, you said you're very blessed, do you make a point of trying to take in the moment and not just looking to a preferred future out there?
Yeah, I would say more so today than ever before. I mentioned we lost 2 officers in 2020 at the same incident. 6 months later, I lost one of my childhood best friends. He was our chief of police. Chief Ben Lowry, he was my best friend since we were 14 years old.
Okay.
And one of the reasons why I came to El Monte, I started my career with the LA County Sheriff's Department. After 5 years, you usually don't leave a department, but it was my childhood dream to work with my friends. And so I joined him and another one of our friends that came here and left the Sheriff's Department as well. And we had aspirations to just, do things as cops in this city that we would have done in high school.
Yeah.
And he elevated to the rank of chief. Had a really tough first year as chief because he had 2 deaths on his watch. And then silently, the day he received the news of the shooting, he was sitting at his doctor's office, and the doctor was telling him he has cancer and it was terminal.
Wow.
And,
all at the same time.
And his response to the doctor was, "I wish that was the worst news I had heard today." He took the shooting more than knowing that he had 6 months to live.
Yeah.
And so that was very impactful. I unpackaged a lot after that incident because a few years prior, going back, I guess it's 8 years prior, my father had committed suicide in 2012. And he had his whole host of demons that he was battling. And a few years later, my mom was murdered in 2015. And I don't know if it was just a lack of understanding or just pride, but I really compartmentalized it. I'm an only child, so without a father, I had to deal with my mom's affairs by myself. And it was a lot to unpack, just what do I do with this house? What do I do with this business? And she had a lot of other stuff going on that I had to kind of make quick decisions on. And it really kind of came to a head at 2020, I think, after everything happened with the officers and I finally had a moment to breathe a few days later. I just kind of had a breakdown. I was driving on my way home and I was talking to my wife. I said, "Hey, I'm finally coming home." I said, "I don't know if I'm going to make it all the way home. I need to stop somewhere." And she says, "Why don't you stop at our good friend Danny and Kristen's home, and I'll meet you there."
Okay.
And we just had a venting session. I let it all out there, and I needed it.
Yeah.
But with all that's happened in my life, I learned that sharing it on my platform was a good thing, not just for me, because I get to vent and kind of let it out therapeutically. But so many people out there were impacted by that. And their purview was, if Aram can get over what he went through and still be positive, still have this zeal and love for Christ, then whatever I'm going through, I should be able to do the same thing. And my message isn't comparing my tragedy to theirs. It's my message is, if I can get through it, so can you.
Yeah. I think, as we're talking and you're sharing that, I had no idea that was coming. And with other guests that we've had as well, Obviously, all the experiences are different, but a common theme seems to be, and I'd be curious of your take on this, even those that are really trying to follow after Christ, it seems that there are things in life that break us. Almost like, how do I compare it? They break us so that God's strength can become stronger. It's almost like the broken bones that then mend even stronger than they were before in some cases. It's really seems very common that so many have. I can think of things in my life as well where it's just really took you, put you almost flat on your face.
Yeah.
And how you kind of alluded to it a little bit. Was there a process? I mean, about how long did it really take where you really kind of got stronger back on your feet? And what you were saying, that's really given you a platform more for people to relate and for you to understand maybe with empathy some of the things they're going through as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think everything I've encountered in my adult life, because I started very young as a police officer, and I got to meet families and kind of in a outside point of view, see what they were going through. And of course, it never really impacts you until it happens to you.
Sure.
And it took almost 20 years into my career for something tragic to happen in my career, in my life. That really gave me something to bite into. An analogy to that was, I was a detective, and I had young children. And as a street cop, when I would go to some of these horrific scenes involving child victims, I felt like I empathized, but I didn't really empathize until I had children of my own, because now I can relate my children's faces to the victims' faces I was seeing.
Sure.
So kind of, if I can just impart that analogy, if I can say that that's how impactful it was for me, it didn't really, the real empathy and the real relation didn't happen until I became a victim of violent crime as a family member, because the ones left behind are often the ones forgotten. And it didn't take a long time for me. Like I said, I always put my faith in God. And it sounds easy for some people to say, and some people just, I guess it's easier to walk away from that and be angry at God. But I never had that moment when I was angry at God. In 2016, so in 2015, January 2015 is when my mother died. And I had a really encouraging classmate of mine in our master's program at Cal Baptist. A year prior, her husband was dying of cancer. And he was this prominent lawyer in the Inland Empire, and he was 6'2", and because of his spinal degeneration, shrunk to 5'7".
Oh wow, that's a lot.
So she had a lot on her plate, right? She was helping her husband, trying to get her master's degree, and I encouraged her. I said, "Hey, Dave would probably want you to stay and be in school, and not give up on your dream." And she said, "You're right." Well, I was getting ready to just walk out completely on my master's program, and she encouraged me to stay. And I would never know years later that she would be the catalyst for me becoming a professor at that university, because unbeknownst to me, one of her best friends was our department chair, who was invited to see me at a guest speaking engagement I had over there. But one of the other really profound things that happened was that same year. The whole reason why I got my master's degree was because I was promotional minded, and I was testing for sergeant. I had tested prior for 2 different occasions to test for sergeant unsuccessfully. That third year was 2016, a year after my mom's death, and her death occurred in Oceanside. And if you don't know, typically what happens in a testing process for sergeant is you take a written test. If you successfully pass that, you get invited to an oral panel. And the oral interview panel is made up of someone a rank higher than you from outside of your agency. So there's 3 panelists, and there's usually 3. So I was testing for sergeant, so there's 3 lieutenants from outside agencies. And we typically have neighboring agencies because that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Well, when I walked into that interview room, there was the first lieutenant I see is a lieutenant from Oceanside. I mean, that's unheard of to go outside the San Gabriel Valley, outside the county, outside 2 counties down to San Diego County. And I really was, I had a game plan going in for my oral because I'm like, this is the 3rd one. I'm gonna knock this one out of the park.
Yeah.
And I see him, and I'm completely I lost it because I'm just less than a year removed from my mom's death, and So I go through the interview, and I think I do really well. And when I get up to shake everybody's hand, the Oceanside lieutenant said, Aram, as soon as you said your name, I recognized who you were. I related, because they had knowledge that her son was an El Monte police officer in the last name. And I want to express my condolences. I said, thank you for your department's professionalism in handling that. And then I walked out of the room. Didn't give it a second thought. Well, I ended up promoting off of that list to sergeant, and I've been here, let's see, that was 2016, and it's 2024 now, and we've never had anybody else from outside the region sit on an oral panel again.
Yeah.
And I mentioned that to my pastor. I said, well, that was a coincidence. And he says, Aram, as a believer, we don't believe in coincidence.
Exactly. Right.
That's providence.
Yeah.
And, I've never had anything close to saying like a miracle had happened, like, oh yeah, that's definitely God's hand in that until that moment happened. And, that's providence right there. So
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
God does things like that a lot where it just doesn't make sense any other way, right?
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of all these things and the filter on how God takes you, and I'm sure there's things that he's also had you say no to. I don't know if you remember any of those, or you just basically say yes every time there's an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, being in this profession, you're exposed to a lot of temptation. For whatever reason, you could be the most unattractive individual in the world, but because you're a police officer and you wear a shiny badge and uniform, you attract a lot of attention from the opposite sex.
Sure.
And that compounded with being popular on social media. So yeah, you just have to cut it off right there.
Right.
And so one of the things I did early on was my wife has access to my social media.
Okay.
And she actually I can't answer a lot of my messages, so she spends a significant time going through and saying, hey, this is a business message, this is a message for prayer, this is a message for advice. So that, and being open and honest, not hiding passwords.
Yeah.
Even my kids have the password to my phone.
Okay.
That's just that's telling Satan no.
And accountability.
Yeah,
right?
and it's important to have accountability. I don't think 21 years of marriage would happen in this day and age if it wasn't for mutual accountability. It goes both ways.
Sure.
And we really, how I met my wife was strange too. So I was living in sin with a girlfriend who I'd been dating for 4.5 years, and I had something internally in me that just said, hey, if we've been together for 4.5 years, I want this to be more meaningful. And if we're going to take the next step, I'd like us to go to church. And her words to me were, if you go back to church, I don't have anything to do with you. And this is someone that said she loved me, that we were in an exclusive relationship for 4.5 years. And if that was not the devil talking, I don't know what is. So I said, you know what? I'm going back to church. I choose.
Pretty clear sign, huh?
Yeah. And so I read a book. So my roommate at the time, he was going through the same thing. His girlfriend cheated on him. And we were really good friends since high school, and he's still one of my best friends today. But we decided to live together, to share the expenses, and we were roommates. I just thought it was another sign of God's providence. We both ended our relationships at the same time.
Yeah.
And instead of doing what most guys do and saying, I'm going to start going to the bars, most young people, I should say, go to the bar, start dating, because there's really no dating apps or anything back then.
Okay.
This is in the mid-'90s. I'm sorry, this is the late 90s. We decided that we were going to just kiss off dating. We're going to focus on God, going to heal ourselves before we even decide to dedicate ourselves to another woman. And then we both started a group, men's Bible study in our living room with other guys, young guys that weren't married yet or dating. And we decided to do it off of a book by Josh McDowell called I Kissed Dating Goodbye. I don't know if you're familiar with it.
I do remember that one. Yeah.
And the premise behind that is that when you say you're dating somebody, you're basically saying, I have the right to take a daughter of God as my own without committing to that person. And I said, the audacity, who are we to take someone? So the idea is to court someone for marriage instead of dating for entertainment or companionship.
Right.
And that really changed our outlook. So a year to that day that I broke up with my ex-girlfriend, and mind you, during that Bible study, we were told to pray, or we were taught to pray very specific things for our wives. I knew I wanted my wife to be a brunette. I wanted my wife to be someone that wanted to be a housewife, wanted to be a mother, put that before career.
Okay.
And maybe it was selfish desires, but that's what I wanted. I knew I wanted to be the bread maker. I wanted someone that was going to stay at home with our kids, and I wanted someone that had a heart to be a wife.
Okay.
Because I had a desire to be a husband, and the internet's new. I discovered America Online and on dial-up.
Oh yeah, I remember those days.
There was a website, a Christian version of AOL called Christian Cafe.
Okay.
And it's just a chat room where believers, and sometimes non-believers who want to challenge believers, go in. And we have this discussion. The topic is pre-trib, post-trib, and there was a debate going on. I had no idea what I believed, and I was just kind of taking it all in. And I see my wife chatting, that her church believes in pre-tribulation. Okay. And then I was taking it all in. I was really intrigued with how this, and there was no profile photos. It's just icons.
Just the name.
Yeah. And I was just really intrigued with this person. So I had a side discussion, and that led to an exchange of emails. And then I think we stopped exchanging emails for 3 months. Just it was completely platonic. There was no romantic innuendos or anything. And then 3 months goes by, and she emails me. She says, "I guess it was your turn to respond. You forgot it was your turn to respond."
Oh, okay. So she was waiting for you.
Yeah, and then that turned into more of a romantic type, not romantic, but maybe an interest.
Okay.
We exchanged phone numbers, and that first time we talked on the phone for 2 hours, and it drove my roommates nuts because it was a landline, and I was hogging it up.
Yeah.
He couldn't use the internet or anything.
Well, you're really dating yourself here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we went on our first date, and 6 months later, I proposed to her, and everybody said that was too fast. You barely know her. But I knew the day I came home from my first date that I wanted to marry her. And years later, I find out that she told her sisters the same thing. And we're proof that it's worked. It's 21
it
years.
Work, right? Yeah, you're bringing back memories here, AOL and that slow dial-up thing. And I remember those chat rooms, and now it's just nasty messages back and forth. Everybody does, and
there's a lot of it.
Post it all publicly, and
and I do get messages from parents asking how, because my oldest daughter's on social media now. She's going to be 19 in a week or so, and I'm really blessed with her because she's not your typical teenage girl. She has no interest in boys. She lives to please her parents and God. She's very innocent.
you're going to have to share your secret on that one.
I think we just got lucky with her because I have 3 other kids that are different. And, but, she's just, I guess she's the first, and we spent the most amount of time invested in her. And, we joked that she's going to be 50 years old and still living with us because her desire is to please us. So and people see that because I share her stuff, and they go, your daughter's so sweet and kind. And my daughter's going through, how do you do that? And I said, you know what? The kids today have more distractions than we ever did. And I think the big secret to that is I waited till my daughter was an adult before I gave her social media. I allowed her to have social media. And that's a funny thing. As an adult, she could have said, I'm going to have an Instagram account. But she asked for permission, even though she was an adult.
That is a rarity, yeah.
And so that's what I get, the advice I give to young parents is there's enough peer pressure and social pressures that happen at their schools.
Yeah.
So we've homeschooled the kids their entire lives. I said, if you can remove them from that and swing that, go for it. I think it's better. But a lot of families can't because they dual income or whatnot. And I said, if you can't remove school, why compound that social pressure by putting an artificial social pressure in there?
Yeah.
Don't allow them to have social media. And if they are going to have social media, make it a shared account between you guys so everything's transparent.
You can see it, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one thing. We have a small Christian school here, and that's part of the reason that we have it at this point. Early on, it was, some kids fall through the cracks, get bullied a little. So it's just an alternative. But more and more what's happening and what's being taught and what's out there, it's just, so now it seems more important than ever.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. Bullying still occurs at homeschool
it sure
homes.
Does. Of course.
The siblings. I'm an only child, so that's a new dynamic for me.
Yeah.
But my wife is one of 7.
I was an only child as well, so
okay,
I hear you. Yeah. But and the social media, it is crazy. It's different than when we were a kid, where I was discussing this just on another episode recently. We used to just wonder if people were thinking about us and wonder what they were doing. Now we see it. It's right there.
We seek it. people are putting it out there. You know, people want this validation, and I don't know if it's a self-confidence thing or if it's just something that gives them that dopamine hit.
Yeah.
But we see people out there soliciting it, asking, "Hey, what do you think of me? Rate me." I remember there was a social media page called Rate My Pic or something like that. Rate My Photo.
I do remember that.
Yeah. It's just what we've evolved to, and you know, I'm all for progress, but cautiously. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I think the government does a good job of that. You know, they hold back on technology and hold back on information because of fear of the ramifications that people can't handle too much at once. Well, social media just hit and it morphed. And I don't think anybody expected to be the monster that it is today.
Yeah, it's definitely. I mean, I'm somewhat addicted to it myself, but I will say that it's definitely a problem for people, especially if you're not having that God guidance where God's guiding us. Okay, don't do that. You know, stop here.
As long as you put God at the center of whatever your activities are. I mean, even social media, I posted daily scriptures. I'm very open about and you know what? That's limited the amount of people that contact me for illicit reasons.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. And it's good to put that out there. And that kind of even gives yourself your own accountability because you don't want to reflect on God in a poor way.
Right.
And I know I feel that quite often. So with all these different things that you're doing, we mentioned in the schedule, I'm just curious, is there certain ones you're the most passionate about? I'm not going to say you're unpassionate about any of them, but are there ones that it's like, hey, if I had to keep one, that would be the one?
Yeah, I mean, everything I do is to glorify God. God's at the center. God's before my wife, before my kids. And I actually put an illustration out there on social media that was hard for even Christians to accept.
Yeah.
They said, that, no, it's my family first, but above everything. And I said, no, you can share that sentiment, but you have to understand that the good of your family comes from God.
Yeah.
So you have to put God first. And both of you, if you and your wife are not equally yoked to the point where you are able to say God is at the center of your relationship, then that's going to fail. That's not going to work because you're putting your priority into the wrong things and you're making decisions based on the wrong priority.
Okay.
So to answer your question, God is first, then my family, and then my service.
Okay.
Service to others, and that's through my profession and through my teaching. So if one of those three things had to go, it would be my service to others because my family is then my next priority. And then, if I have to make a tough decision between God and my family, then the obvious choice is God first. And knowing that He trusted me to make difficult decisions, there's illustrations in the Bible where God would ask people in the Old Testament to make decisions that would adversely affect family members for God. And you have to trust that that's the process, that what He's asking you to do is for a reason specific for you and Him.
Now, I'm curious, have you had a situation where it's come up where you had to choose God and what He was telling you over what maybe someone in the family preferred or wanted, and maybe even over what you preferred?
Yeah. I mean, I'd have to really think about it. I don't think I was put into a lot of difficult positions with my family. Both my parents are small business owners, and I think they devoted a lot of their time into their small business, so which is another testimony for me. I had idle hands, idle time, and I could have gotten in trouble a lot. Right? I didn't. I was surrounded by really good friends. I mean, it's very rare to say that your best friends at age 14 are still your best friends today.
Yeah, it is rare.
And I could have been on the streets running amok and had every excuse because my parents were absent, but I didn't. I always had a sense of responsibility, and I always had that sense that I needed to be a leader in my group, whether it was football or my friends or at work here. I always had that desire to elevate to that leader, but knowing that if I wanted to be in a leadership position, I had better be that example. And so even now that I've attained that position of lieutenant, I'm still living that example. I preach, even though I'm not on the streets taking down bad guys, I still train jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
And that motivates the younger guys to do jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
But I've had to make difficult decisions, not from pressures from the family, but I told you earlier that I had a desire to be on TV, and God really had opened some doors for me. I played a guest role, thanks to my developing notoriety at the time on social media, on a TV show called Checkpoint Charlie. It was on the Vet on Vet TV. And so Vet TV, if you don't know, it's a subscription-based channel, streaming service, but it's played at every military installation. It's part of their cable package.
Oh, okay.
So every military base, every
So
housing.
So your face has been seen. In
Yeah.
most of these.
So
Okay.
I got really good feedback from that one episode. I played a military police officer's father.
Okay.
And I got really good feedback that they offered me a permanent role on another show that they developed for me. And the character was, it's like a Star Trek type spaceship.
Okay.
And I'm the commander of that ship. And as I'm reading the script, I'm having a relationship with the ship itself, the AI, the Siri
okay.
of the ship, right?
Okay.
And because we're having conversations and it turns romantic, and I was very flattered that they offered me this role. Financially, it would have been great for the family. And if I was purely one of those guys that was seeking notoriety and dollars, and not wondering how does this advance the kingdom of God,
Right.
or reflect on me as a Christian, or as a husband, or as a father, I would have probably compromised and accepted it because the money was good. The what it would have led up to was even better. And I had to say no because I couldn't agree with the script. Number one, I couldn't be on something that was going to be forever on the internet, recorded in digital time and space, that maybe if I decided to run for politics later, that it would embarrass me.
Yeah.
I just couldn't do that. So yeah, I had to walk away from decisions that were presented to me, not necessarily from the family, but just opportunities that were presented to me.
Got it. No, that makes sense. That would have been a tough one, though. Yeah. So let's talk about the El Monte PD just a little bit. I mean, I've been here for quite a long time, since the early 90s, so I've seen it for quite a while. Of course, we're right next door where we're at right now. And I will tell you, it's always been a good department. But the one thing that I seem to notice, say the last 5-10 years, is, to me, it's a great department from my experience that I've had. I think there's a lot of officers even that are very concerned about the actual community here. And so I'm just curious, you said you had come from the sheriff's department and then you made the move over because of connections that you had. I'm assuming you're glad you did.
Yeah, it worked out good for me here. I think it would have worked out great for me at the sheriff's department as well. I was very well liked, very well respected, but I just didn't feel that community investment. The county is such a huge territory,
Yeah, right.
And you're never in one station, one assignment. You're always moving around every couple of years. And I really had a desire to be invested in a community. So my relation to El Monte is, for 12 years, my dad had a video shop on the corner of Ramona and Cogswell. And so I knew a lot of people here. I knew the local firefighters. I knew the local cops. I was there since age 10, ringing up the receipts and taking cash for videos and video games eventually. And that was a great ride. I did that till I was 18. Actually, my dad went missing for about a year when I turned 18. He had dependency issues and he disappeared. And the responsible thing at age 18 was to run the shop. And I never ran it knowing that, I'm just going to maintain it for my dad to come back. I was like, I stepped up. Here it is. I'm running the shop. Had to learn at a very early age how to run a business. And I had a lot of interactions with people in the community that were like, how does a kid like you run a business like this? I said, I want to know that, but I'm honest with you, you're honest with me, and that's how I want to run my business. And then Blockbuster decided they were going to build a Blockbuster right across the street, and that ended that ride. But I had a lot of takeaways from that. I still have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I think I developed a lot of business acumen from that.
Sure.
But that's my relation to El Monte. And when I left the sheriff's department, there was really 3 agencies that officers were really seeking to go to. One of them was Santa Ana, the other was Anaheim, and the other was El Monte. And I think the difference is, when I interviewed for all 3 departments, one of the things I heard, what they asked me was, what is your investment in El Monte? None of the other departments asked me that. They would ask me, what do you know about Anaheim? Why do you want to work at Santa Ana? But the question that was relayed to me was, what is your investment into El Monte? And that really struck a chord with me.
Yeah.
And I could honestly say, well, I grew to be familiar with the neighborhood. I grew familiar with the people, and it was very similar to where I grew up, and that's where I want to be invested. And lo and behold, I was hired. And one of the things that you mentioned, that we're a great department, I do believe so myself. Because of my social media, I've had opportunities to travel the country and speak at various engagements, at various police departments, police events. And in 2020, when we had our tragedy, we had a lot of police departments come to us. We had so many officers from other agencies asking if we were hiring, just from their experience that they saw here.
Yeah.
And mind you, we visit other police departments when they have tragedies too. And I never once had that desire to leave, because and people said, "Oh, El Monte's great. Is it because you guys are having this tragedy?" I said, "No, this is always how we are. We're very close to each other." And I think the formula to that, and I'm going to segue again. I do that a lot.
That's okay.
The formula to your question, what makes El Monte so successful, is that we made a intentional investment in hiring people that are invested in the city.
Right.
So what's unique about us is almost every officer either grew up in the city, was born and raised in the city, still live in the city, have family in the city, or have some sort of close connection to the city.
I noticed that. Yeah. I would agree with you. I think that's a lot of what makes it good.
I mean, you literally spend your blood, sweat, and tears here for an agency. It's easier to do that when you're invested. If I worked for an area that I had no connection to, the people would be a commodity to me. They wouldn't be a connection. So we do very unique things here. We don't have an expectation like other departments do to give a certain amount of tickets, because our philosophy is, well, we might be giving an officer's family member a ticket.
Yeah.
The point of stopping someone is to educate them, not to punish them. That's why we have a judicial system. Law enforcement is to educate. That's our arm. And so many people forget that. They think, I'm the law, I'm the authority, and that's not our job to punish. That's a judicial system.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I was watching one of your other podcast segments where you were talking about giving tickets, and then it was also mentioned about highway patrol.
Yeah.
And I know that that's one of the biggest differences I've seen. I've been pulled over in El Monte for infractions, and I mean, there are a couple times I deserved it, but and I got out of a couple as well. But yeah, highway patrol, forget it. They got you dead to rights.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's their primary function, right?
Right,
And
that's what they're doing,
and they're a blessing in disguise, in the sense that if they weren't so strict with that, we'd probably have a multitude of more deaths that we do, traffic-related deaths.
Yeah.
So they do, I have a work car that I drive home, and it's got exempt. It's a very obviously a government car.
Okay.
And I could abuse that and drive, but I know other people on the road recognize it's a government car.
Yeah.
But I also know that CHP is out there, and so if it's making me someone who could possibly get away with breaking infractions slow down, then I know it's making the general public slow down as well. So.
Well, it does. You see them on the side of the road, and it causes you to slow down. Definitely. I agree with you there. But yeah, I tried to go and I tried to, where you challenge the ticket, so then they give you a court date.
Right.
And of course, if the officer doesn't show up, then you're going to automatically be dismissed. So I decided to take my chances, and it must have been Highway Patrol Day, because it was all the Highway Patrol officers. They walked in, the judge knew them all by name, and he had all his notes. And it's like, oh no, this is not going to work.
I mean, they live for that stuff. That's their primary function.
Right.
They're traffic enforcement. They are law enforcement by the definition, but really, what laws are they enforcing? The vehicle code.
Right.
Whereas a street cop, we live for the foot chase, the pursuit, and all that stuff.
Exactly.
It's just a different type of mental approach to law enforcement. There's definitely a need for them. God bless them. They do a great job. I think a CHP's officer would write more tickets in one day than I've written in my entire career.
Yeah, I prefer your method.
Yeah. I think most people do. Yeah.
Let me ask this, though, because this is a question that's coming up to me. So for a typical, we're thinking about, the very dangerous things and sometimes even tragic things like you mentioned that happen. But what is the typical call, the typical type of interaction that happens on a usual day for people that, are either on patrol or even like you're doing detective work a lot?
Yeah, I wish there was an easy answer to that, because the approach every day is anything but typical. We go in, and you would think after 25 years on the job, I know what I'm going to expect. I more or less do now because I'm not a patrol officer anymore. I'm an
Okay.
administrator, so my function is a little different. But when I was a patrol officer, you just didn't know what you were going to get. You had an expectation, like on a full moon, it was going to be crazy. On a summer holiday weekend, it was going to be crazy. You knew it was going to be busy. You just didn't know what you were going to have. And I think that's the beauty of this job is, I've had close family members and friends be in their career for as long as I have, and they're miserable. They don't look forward to going to work. And I can honestly say after 25 years, I still look forward to going into work every day because it's a different job every day.
Okay.
I mean, there are some days that's slower than others, but when you work a busy city, you're going to be busy. And before you know it, your 12 and a half hours of your shift are over. And you're like, whoa, when did that happen? So I wish there was a simple answer to what we encounter most. What I can tell you that's consistent is we don't know what we're going to encounter. I mean, we get everything from neighbor disputes, internet fraud, domestic violence, child abuse, people crimes, property crimes. I mean, you see it all here. So the joke amongst the law enforcement community locally is that when you say you worked 5 years here in El Monte, it's actually 35 years because we work in dog years here.
Oh, yeah.
So the experience you get here in 1 year, is equal to maybe 5 years in Arcadia, if that, and there's just a city next door. There's,
a little more routine over there.
Yeah.
So I guess it's fair to say there's been times where, even though you've been on a job for a long time, you may take a look and go, wow, that's a new one. Hadn't seen that before.
Yeah. I mean, I can't get into this one because it's a little graphic, but we recently had a discovery in one of our dumpsters at an apartment in our city, and it was something that you would see out of a horror movie. And I said, that's new. That's never happened. And then there's just some things that aren't new to you but are still shocking to the conscience.
Sure. Just never get used to completely,
right? It's just, that's a good way of putting it. You never get used to it.
Yeah. Well, I think there's some things that if you did get used to it, it would be kind of concerning.
Yeah, and there's just some people, again, going back to God, if I didn't have my faith and know that certain things happen for a reason, I would probably question why this child, why this victim, and that would drive me insane. I'd probably need significant therapy to recover from that.
Yeah.
But you have to trust that it happens for a reason.
So on service, which is a big emphasis, you have it in good order. You mentioned it. You have God first, you have family, then you have service after that. But obviously it's a huge part of your life. Why is, you mentioned there were a lot of reasons why you wouldn't have gone this direction as a child. Your parents were very busy. You had a lot of free times. So why do you think service in all these different capacities, because pretty much everything you're doing, although it's different, it's serving people in some way. Why is that so important to you?
So one of the things I didn't mention is I was born on an Army base. My dad was a Vietnam vet. He served in the Army. Both his brothers served in the Army, and my grandfather served in the Army. So imagine my grandfather. My grandfather was career Army. He was a criminal investigation detachment investigator. So there's a military police, the MPs. So he was part of the 19th MP detachment stationed in Seoul, Korea. But part of that detachment, he was in a secondary unit called the CID investigators. So it's kind of like NCIS. They're the detectives of the MPs. Yeah. So he was CID, and he did that for 20 years, and raised my dad and both my uncles and my aunt on military housing. So they were very regimented and disciplined. Compound that with now my father, who grew up raised on the military base, disciplined and regimented, times two.
Yeah.
So I did have that early on in my life. And then the last early memory I have of military housing was in Tacoma, Washington. We lived in Fort Lewis, and then my dad discharged and started his civilian life. But even though they were busy with their businesses, they were still parents. And it seemed like a lot of the parent-son interactions we had were parent disciplining son.
Okay.
And it was stuff that if it occurred in 2024, it would probably land them in front of a DCFS investigator.
Times have changed, yeah.
But I remember routinely getting the same belt. I can still remember the belt. It was a black leather belt with a tan underside and a gold brass buckle. but I would routinely get that. My mom, I remember the last time she spanked me with a wooden spoon, it broke on she spanked me on my calves, and it broke. And we both laughed about it, actually, as it happened.
Okay.
I think she kind of knew at that point I was kind of used to the pain. It didn't do
big.
much.
Yeah.
But, I think as a wild child, if I didn't have that discipline early on, those opportunities I had with all that idle time and idle hands would have gotten me to make decisions without thinking about the consequence. I had consequence embedded in me early on since birth that kind of stuck with me. So I think the craving of discipline, having structure, and appreciating the rule of law, for me, before I knew the rule of law, it was the rule of rule. These are the rules in the house. That morphed into the appreciation of the rule of law. But it was that having a family that was military, that dedicated their lives to service, patriotism. Back then, we were, being Korean American. They didn't speak Korean a lot at home. It was all about assimilation. You're American. You don't need to speak Korean anymore. And I'm still to this day angry that I never learned Korean, because I could have had a totally different career speaking two languages. But in any event, today we have immigrants that come to America wanting that American dream, but kind of a hybrid. I still want to retain my ability to speak my language without learning the new language and take advantage of this great nation without having to give up where I came from, which is great. I think that's what makes America great, the diversity. But that wasn't the philosophy back in the 60s and 70s and 80s when I was growing up, 70s and 80s. And so that was my mindset. Ever since I was 5 years old, I knew I was going to join the military. At age 17, when I came close to high school graduation, I told them I was going to enlist and I wanted my parents to go with me. And they stopped me and they said, we decided you can go in the Army, but after you graduate college. And the reason being was because everybody in my family was enlisted. Okay. And they knew that the people that did well in the military were the commissioned officers. And you couldn't get your commission unless you went to college.
Okay.
And so I said, okay, it's the only reason why I went to college. I went to Cal State LA. I wasn't a college freshman. I was a 13th grader, is the joke. Yeah. Because I was a high schooler lost in college. And my third year in college, I was recruited by the sheriff's department. So I said, you know what? It's a nice compromise between in the military and the civilian life, and I could still serve in that capacity. I'd be the first police officer in my family. And so I said, I'm going to blaze my own trail and do that, and the rest is history.
Awesome. Well, your podcast. Tell us a little bit about podcasts. How do people find it? And then what's your major emphasis? I noticed that it seems you like to teach quite a bit.
Yeah. So I'll tell you how the podcast started is my co-host, Kristen Haudegi, she's one of my best friends. She's a dispatcher here. Okay. Her husband is one of my best friends, Daniel Haudegi, who's a sergeant here. Okay. And we worked the same shift and we carpooled. And we would have these great conversations during our carpool. And sometimes we would go live with our conversations, and people said, you know what? These are great. I look forward to when you guys go live. And we didn't do it a lot. We did a couple times. And the audience was like, man, if you guys are talking about this topic and putting it live, I can't wait to hear what your other ones are. And that's where we're like, we should start a podcast. Yeah. And I think the original title was the Carpool Podcast or something like that. And Danny's not one for the camera or the mic, so he opted to go out of it. But Christian and I had really good banter. And so we decided to put our eggs in a basket and do it. Not knowing. Our approach was, we're going to put it out there. If anybody wants to listen, they'll listen. Sure. And our opening week, we debuted at number 75 behind the Gary V podcast on Apple charts.
Pretty legit, yeah.
And we stayed in the top 200 in not just the U.S. Apple charts, but Canada, France, and Sweden. Okay. And occasionally we pop up on other charts, but people really gravitated to what we had to talk about. And we did it for 4.5 years. The episodes are out there still, so if you're new to the podcast, you can find it on any podcast platform. It's called the 911 Strong Podcast, and that name came from my handle on social media, which was 911 Strong. Got it. And it's the 911 Strong Podcast with Kristen and Aram. There's about 100 episodes on there, so you can listen from episode 1. They're evergreen, or you can pick up from wherever the podcast lands you and just listen to different episodes. But we talk about different subjects because, so Kristen's unique. She's a police dispatcher, but she's also a police wife and a police daughter and a police granddaughter.
She's got all ends of the spectrum.
So she gets to see what it's like to grow up as a police daughter, what it's like to grow up as a police granddaughter, what it's like to be a police wife, what's it like to be on the front lines, on the phones, answering. So she gives a unique perspective that I can't give, or I give the perspective of a police sergeant at the time. And, we were rolling along. We did great. We picked up great sponsors. We went from having this be a fun thing, and it turned into a business. And, when you get popular on podcasts and you end up on the charts, people start to notice, and it's a nice feeling to have sponsors bidding for space. Sure. And we did it in untraditional ways. We could have easily gone with a platform that embedded ads, and then they did ad revenue sharing. Yeah. But that wasn't important to us, and it was almost as if we were holding out to the sponsors. It looked like we were just holding out, but it wasn't. I just didn't want to deal with editing my podcast to embed ads because I was using a certain platform. And it worked to our advantage because the next thing you know, we had our first major one was the Police Credit Union of California, a bank, a financial institution of all places. But because they were focused on police families, the police world, our podcast was a natural endeavor for them to seek us out. And we had a couple meetings back and forth, and I said, listen, I don't want my podcast to be a billboard for advertisements. You get one ad at the beginning of the podcast, and that's it. And we'll take your dollar offer. And they were completely fine with it. And that grew the next year and the next year. Nice. And so when I said it's not about the dollars, it's about glorifying God, it's true, because the third year we had the sponsor was our fourth and a half year having the podcast. We made a decision to walk away, to keep the podcast out there, but not to record any new episodes, because we had the shooting. We lost our 2 officers, and we were very close with the families that were left behind. We just didn't feel right pursuing those endeavors when it should be a time for us to be with our family here. Yeah. And so we took a 6-month leave, and we said we were going to come back and approach it. And the 6 months came and went, and Kristen and I looked at each other and said, do we want to get back in this? And she said, you know what? It's been nice not having to book guests, schedule times, have meetings with our sponsors. And I said, you know what? You're right. You mentioned how do I balance it all? Well, yeah, one of the things we did was take away something that took up a significant amount of time in our lives. And there's no regrets. We walked away from a lot of money. We had 2 major sponsors at that time. Our second year, we picked up ProForce Law Enforcement, which is they're in Brea. There's one in Mesa, Arizona, and one in Brea, but they're a gun store essentially, but they're only for first responders. So they're in a nondescript warehouse, but so when a new agency buys guns, they typically go through ProForce outfits. So they're a huge agency, and so we had 2 big, significant sponsors. And financially, did it hurt us? I don't think so. Did it stop us from going on great vacations? Absolutely, but that's not important in the grand scheme of things. When I think 5-10 years from now, when people look back and say, "Hey, what did you do during that time?" I think we'll get a lot more respect for putting a pause, putting a break on the podcast, and being there for our people and our families. Right.
Do you think sometime down the line, God may lead you back to it?
Possibly. So about 6 months before we ended the podcast, our sponsor provided us with a recording space. Okay. Built a beautiful studio for us, and it was a disappointment, but they understood why we had to walk away. But that space is still available, and they've approached me about doing a spinoff where I do in-studio one-on-one guests with people, not just law enforcement. This is not a law enforcement podcast, but it would be a general podcast hosted by me. And that was intriguing because, for the last 25 years, everything I've done is law enforcement related. Yeah. And this would be intriguing to do something outside of that. Even the TV show I'm on now on Fox is I Crime with Elizabeth Vargas. It's law enforcement related. I'm the law enforcement panelist, and the other show I had before the network got canceled was what was that called? It was on the First Responder Network. The name will come to me later, but it was whatever show it was with Aram Choe, and I was the headliner on that show. We did 6 episodes, had great ratings. I got picked up for an entire season. The production staff was jazzed. The day we had the meeting for our production meeting for the next 6 episodes, that evening, the production staff got fired. So the parent company decided to get rid of the production arm of that company. So, things come and go. You can't, but the point of that was everything I've done that was police related, and this next opportunity that I may or may not entertain is only entertaining because it's not police associated.
Okay. So that would be the next question I was going to lead to. Any goals or things on the horizon that seem to be in your heart right now? So that would be one of those, to do something kind of expand your...
Yeah, so early last year, a city councilman and a mayor from another city approached me and asked me if I would consider putting in for their chief position at their police department.
Okay.
And I'd never thought about being a chief of police at any other agency other than El Monte. This is where I spent the last 20 years of my career. This is where I've promoted. This is where I've developed relationships and invested.
Yeah.
And if I had an opportunity to be in charge here, I would love that opportunity. But just, things politically and timing, it may not happen. So when this other city came knocking, it really started sparking my interest and thinking, I thought to myself, yeah, it'd be great to run my own department one day. Because I would run it in such a unique way. It would be, my first investment would be for the people, the employees. Because my philosophy is when the employees are happy and energized and motivated, that's how they'll treat the public. And when I was coming up here back in the day, the early 2000s, it was the sergeant was like, here's your report. This was horrible. Stop doing this. You don't do this. You don't do that. And we kind of walked around with our heads down. When I had a chance to run my own team, briefings were lighthearted. We took care of business, but we always ended it with a joke, laughing, talking about our families, and they left motivated. Yeah. And the other thing I did was I was one of the few sergeants that would, in the history of our department, that would stand at that back door and wait for every last one of my officers to come in at the end of the shift, and I'd pat them on the back.
Okay.
And that's the kind of philosophy and culture I want to bring to whatever agency I get to run. So if that opportunity ever comes again to run a police department, I'd consider it.
Well, you're putting it out there. Who knows? Right?
Yeah, maybe.
And it's interesting you bring that up because, we were talking earlier about El Monte PD and my experience with it, and I didn't really want to say it. But I will say that although it's always been good, in the past, 15, 20 years ago, officers seemed a little less friendly, a little more grumpier than they do now. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a hard one. I could, when you say that, I can think of a few faces that immediately pop into mind, and I think it's a personality thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes the uniform amplifies that.
Yeah.
If you're kind of a jerk in your personal life, I think the uniform maybe can amplify that. And it's just like in any profession that's made up of humans. We're not all cookie cutters.
Sure.
Everybody's got a different paradigm. Everybody comes into work. I like to say this. I once responded to a call where we had a child, a 1.5-year-old died. And as soon as I finished concluding that one, and I had a 1.5-year-old at home, I didn't have time to go talk to a counselor or get a drink or say I needed a break. I needed to go to the next call. The next call was a neighbor dispute. One neighbor was upset that he was watering his grass and dog's feces into the other side of the fence on the neighbor's yard. And they were both acting childish. And I think back then these two people were in their 50s.
Okay.
And here I am, a 20-something-year-old guy, and I'm like, can't you be a grown-up? Can't you be adults about this? Stop throwing your poop over there, and you stop arguing with him, and stop calling the police to handle your problems, figuring it out yourself. And I could see them looking back and saying, hey, that officer was a jerk. But they had no idea that I was...
Where'd you just come from?
Just came from.
Yeah.
So you've got to remember that, and we have to remember this as police officers too. Remember when when we interact with the public, it's almost negative, always negative, because you're either calling us at a time of crisis that you need the police to come out for, it's not a good time, or we are doing some sort of enforcement. We're stopping you for an infraction or something that we're going to arrest you on or investigate you on. So it's not a positive thing. Unlike a firefighter, for instance, I always tell people if you want to go into public safety and you want pats on the back, become a firefighter, because everybody loves firefighters. They show up to rescue people. They get to go shopping in their work clothes and take their work truck. They get to work out on duty. We don't get to do that because we're constantly patrolling and enforcing and keeping the city safe. And after years and years of people having a negative countenance on us or negative reaction to us, you're not always going to get a warm, friendly smile, because the expectation is you're smiling now, but give me a minute. You're not going to like what I have to say. Or when we go out for your crisis, you're not smiling, so we're not going to smile. And I wish more people understood that. And that's sort of what I relate to people on the podcast. I talk about my experience as a veteran police officer. And I think a lot of people who aren't police officers or don't have police relationships listen to the podcast and say, oh, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, last question.
Sure.
This has been great, by the way. I appreciate you taking all this time. And I'm going to kind of throw it out there as an open question. So a lot of people will be watching this now and in the future. It's going to be out there unless YouTube takes it down for some reason, which I don't foresee. People searching for answers. I'm sure you encounter this all the time. And they're missing something in life and they don't know what it is. You've shared a lot in this podcast today about how your faith and that relationship with God from a small child all the way through has carried you through the great times and even very tough times. What do you want to say to them as God leads you? I'll let you look right at the camera and say it. That a relationship with God, although it's not going to make all the problems disappear, why it's been so key to you and why they should pursue that.
Yeah. I think at this point, if you have God in your life, you have to accept that God is steering you. You have to trust Him that He's steering you for the right reasons. You may not see it now. Certainly when my dad committed suicide, when my mom was murdered, when we lost two of our good friends in one incident, I had every right to be angry. But I could not put myself at the same mental level as God and understand why things happened. It would be foolish of me to try to understand those things. But the one thing I can, at my level, understand is that sometimes God puts us through tragedies, through challenges, because when we overcome them, it builds our character. And I think when we finally go to heaven, we're going to be such filled with character, looking back, knowing that God had a hand in building our character to get there, that it's going to be an incredible thing. And look, when those tragedies happen, it's tough. And it's easy for me to sit down and say, as it's happening, you got to give it to God. But that's how I was able to sleep at night. I've had times, I lost my house in 2011. I had to short sell it because I couldn't afford to keep the adjustable mortgage on it. And I felt like such a failure because I let my family down. I lost a house. I couldn't fulfill my financial responsibility. But it gave me a desire to be more financially responsible. And today we have a beautiful home that we can afford. It's a responsible payment. And it's just one of those things that made me a better human being. I had to go through those difficult times to come out the other end the person I am today. So I could have easily given up, but I trusted God. I had a lot of sleepless nights. And the only reason why I can go back to bed was trusting that I had just give it to God and let God determine what was going to happen and be okay with it. And that's my advice to a lot of people going through tough times is nothing you do, if it's destined to happen, nothing you do is going to stop it. It's a freight train that's not going to stop. All you're going to do is prolong sleepless nights and build anxiety. And the minute you give it to God, that anxiety goes away.
Yeah. It tells us that in Scripture, right? That's what we're supposed to
Amen.
do. So great. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Let me just ask this. There's people out there that may have enjoyed the podcast, been influenced by something you said. What's the best way to get in touch with you if they wanted to reach out to you?
Yeah, the best channel, the one I spend the most time on is my Instagram. It's 911 Strong. That's the numbers 911, like you call 911 for police, and Strong, all one alphanumeric code. I have a blue check mark so you know it's me. There's a few imposter pages out there. If you message me, I read, between my wife and I, we read all the messages. There's some that we ignore, but if it's truly you reaching out for advice, I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah, so make sure you do that. If something, I'm sure you want people to reach out to you because you want to be able to help them in any way possible. And also, if you have not subscribed to this podcast, we encourage you to please do so and share, especially this episode, with other people that you think might be benefited from it and blessed by it. So we always appreciate you, and we look forward to all the future episodes we're going to do as well. So this has been the Audacious Faith Podcast, and we look forward to seeing you next time. God bless you.